Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be sharpening some saw chain. Not chainsaws. Saw chain. Chainsaws. Saw chain. I bought this, I don't know how many years ago. I got it mounted in my small equipment room. And the first thing we're going to do is dress the grinding stone. And I have a gauge that comes with the machine. You can buy these from Oregon and various other places. And it's so you keep the correct radius on your stone. And to do that, you just turn your stone on. Turn our stone on. And I'm just going to kind of So I just cleaned it up. The biggest reason you're doing that is every time you sharpen a chain, you're getting all kind of oils and stuff. So the stone will get loaded up and it won't cut like it's supposed to. So I dressed it up. I'm just going to double check with my gauge and make sure that my radius still looks good, and it does. You can do several different size stones on here. It also has all the different holes for the size of round file you would use. There's a depth gauge for the cutter for certain size chain. That's 325 chain, 3/8 chain. It should be that deep. And that's for 440 chain, has that depth of the cutter. You can do a lot of stuff with this little guide. So when it comes to all the angles that you're going to set your machine to, it'll usually tell you on the box that the chain come in, whether it's Oregon or steel or whatever kind of chain manufacturer you're buying it from. So on this type chain, we're at 30 degrees. So this angle is 30 degrees. On this machine, if you're doing a right cutter, you pull this knob towards you. So loosen this up just so you can see how it moves back and forth. Some chains you might want to grind on the center. If I was grinding the rakers down, I would do that probably on the center. But for right cutters, you also pull it here. There's a tick mark on this side that lines up with another one. And then I'm going to set it to 30 degrees here. And then the angle that my stone is coming down is set on 55 degrees, and that is in the book, the catalog. I do not see it on here, the angle that it's supposed to come down. But that information is out there. Just make sure, the biggest takeaway is make sure you know what angles you're grinding on your chain to match the angles that came from the factory. If you know a whole lot about chainsaws, maybe you found that a certain degree cuts faster or lasts longer, knock yourself out. This is definitely basics of how to sharpen a chain on an electric grinder. So the next thing is we want to get this adjustment. So this adjusts, we're going to loosen this up. I like to put just a little tension against our guide here and pull the grinding stone down and see where we are. I'll go ahead and tighten this up. This just holds our chain from moving. This is a 50 gauge chain. It's a 3/8 chain, and the gauge, this piece here, is 50 thousandths. This is adjustable with that bolt. So if you go to a 325 chain, it is 68 thousandths. So you'd have to open up this screw to make this gap wider in here. But we got this one set up. We're on our right cutter. We got it tight. I'm going to let this down, and we're not quite touching there. So I'm going to loosen this just a little bit and adjust it in some until we get just a little contact there, you know, and we don't want much. You can see these are all shiny. That one, somebody took a black marker and marked it. And that's where we know where to start and when we get back around to the beginning. So that's the tooth we're going to start on. I'm going to tighten that up. If you were to see any of these cutters that were a lot shorter than another cutter, you would want to start with that cutter. Because if these cutters don't match in length, the saw is going to track left or right, depending on which one is longer and which one's shorter. We got it marked. We're going to start grinding right here. The biggest thing when we're grinding these is we don't want to overheat them. So just take it easy, little strokes. We don't want to grind down into the gullet down here and into the chain, you know, more in here. If we're grinding too deep, there's an adjustment we can make over here. I want to just screw it in too far. So now that's as far as it goes down, and we can see that's not deep enough. So we'll open it up until we get in there. So after we've ground, we got our first tooth set up and ready to go. We're just going to loosen that. We'll pull the chain through until we get to the next cutter. Again, just a little pressure here. You know, I'm not pulling real hard on that. And I tighten that up, and I'm going back to grinding. And I'm going to do all the left cutters. And then I'll switch over to do the right-hand side. You want to make sure you're taking off enough so you got a sharp edge there. And you can tell by your grinding stone how quick it's removing metal. You know, if it's not moving it fast, you might need to dress your stone. It shouldn't take much, you know, to knock it off. And if you're seeing blue, it's getting too hot. You're either stone's loaded up or you're trying to remove too much material. Now we're back around to our first tooth. See our black mark on there? So now I'm gonna flip it over and get ready to do the left cutter. And I've just found on this machine, I have to run this in so it gets behind the left cutter better, more in the center of the left cutter. And then I got to loosen this. I'm going to turn it to 30 degrees on the other side and push this away from me. And tighten it back down right there. And then I should be ready to grind. That's how we know we're back around. You know, I went down, I'm not grinding anything. I already ground that tooth. So that's another way to find out you made it all the way around. So just to make it easier to see, I'm just going to turn this to 0 degrees and set it straight up. And level my bed out there. And get that somewhat out of the way. We could file these by hand, or we can file it with a machine. To file it with a machine, we need to change our stone out to a square stone. So the more we grind the tooth back, the more we have to take down the depth gauge or the raker, whatever you want to call it. And this is a depth gauge tool that you lay on the chain, and it tells you how tall or what height the raker should be at. So laying it on there, it's just barely sticking up, not much. So I probably wouldn't mess with this. If it was sticking up any higher than that, I would definitely grind down the depth gauge. If the depth gauge is too low, the chain's just going to bite and bog down in the wood, and you're not going to be able to cut anything. If it's too high, the chain's just going to spin around and around and around, and you're not going to cut anything. So if the saw's binding, you know, digging into the wood and locking down, maybe your depth gauges are too short. And if you're not sawing anything and the chain's just running over the wood and not removing anything, maybe they're too high. So you do need one of these to measure it. Since the teeth should all be the same length because of the procedure we used here, once we measure one depth gauge, we can set our machine up to 90 degrees here. We got this at 0. We would put on our square stone, so this has a square face on the stone, and we would keep putting this on, grinding a little bit, putting it on, grinding until we get the right depth on our depth gauge. And once it's set with our stop over here and our screw, then we could go through and grind each one of the depth gauges. And we would need to do that for each chain each time we grind the depth gauges. So this can be a more, a better way than hand filing sometimes, but the verdict's out. Some of the old guys really like to use a hand file and say they can get it sharper and all those things. And I would encourage anybody to learn how to use a hand file because it's something that you can do in the field. But unfortunately here at the golf course, most of our people, operators that use a chainsaw are not very proficient in hand filing a saw. So it's part of our procedure when they're done using the chainsaw, they drop it off in the shop and we check it out. And if the chain's dull, we sharpen it this way. If it just, one or two teeth has some nicks on it, we'll use a hand file. All depends on how severely it's damaged. And I've always been the type where, if it was a new chain and it just got a semi-dull, it's a lot quicker just to touch it up on the saw with a round file and still make some really good round files with guides on them to make it easier for the operators. And then when it gets in really bad shape, bring it back here and you can true it back up and bring it back to manufacturer specifications just like what's on the box. Until next time, see you, bye.